but
Okay. Do you guys want to go
yeah.
without mods? I can just, when the timers are up, I can just reset the timers and just let you guys go.
Sure,
That works.
I'm down for that.
Okay. All right. Let me get the
Also,
timers.
can you hear me like when my mic is like this? Is my like hearable?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay, cool.
Let me change the
I'm ready.
background
So.
up here. All right.
Cool.
So, okay, you're going to get 5 minutes opening. If you don't want any of your time anymore, just cede your time and then I'll stop the timer. And then just give me a little bit of time in between each to reset the timers and change the background. But other than that, on your first word.
Cool. Yeah. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about abortion today. I'm taking the affirmative that abortion is immoral. And of course, Liam is taking the negation. So I'm just going to be presenting an argument. It's just going to be a pretty simple modus tollens argument, really. The argument is something like this. If some action is morally good, then the action optimally satisfies the predicate XYZ, where the extension of XYZ is such that it includes a certain cluster of natural facts or homeostatic property clusters more specifically. And the second premise is that abortion does not optimally satisfy the predicate XYZ. And so in virtue of this fact, the abortion is not morally good. Now, we could sort of run through what is exactly meant by homeostatic property clusters and what exactly I take, or rather the conception of moral properties that I take. So I have a background belief known as synthetic descriptivism. So I take a view where moral properties like goods, bads, shoulds, oughts, that those things are synthetically reducible to non-moral natural properties. Okay, so an example of this would be whenever somebody utters the sentence wrong, for example, right? That sentence is going to have an extension, or rather the word wrong there is going to have an extension. And that extension, right, is just going to be when wrong instantiates a certain set of facts or a certain set of properties. And those facts might include things like eudaimonic satisfaction, for example. It might include things like virtue manifestation, negative affective states, reactive attitudes, coercion, etc. Right? It could include a list of facts, all of which plausibly fall under the extension of that predicate. And when I say moral properties are synthetically reducible to non-moral natural properties, that's just to say that moral properties or moral facts are not ultimately anything over and above certain natural facts. But it's important to clarify that that type of relation that obtains between moral properties and natural facts is not a sort of, you could say, trivial conceptual equivalence relation. Rather, it's a connection, a synthetic connection between moral and natural properties that's discovered through a posteriori investigative methods, like, for example, philosophical inquiry or empirical reasoning, for example. And so with this, we can conclude, or rather infer, that goodness is a homeostatic property cluster. Goodness is not the type of thing that's identifiable with one single essence or one single natural fact. Rather, goodness is identifiable with a cluster of natural properties, and that cluster of natural properties are causally maintained by that homeostatic mechanism in such a way where they typically co-occur. And so all actions, or at least most actions that don't satisfy this extension, are actions that I take to be wrong. And I can concede the rest of my time.
Neat. Okay, we're ready.
All right. On your first word.
What's up, guys? I'm Liam. A little bit about me. I'm a finance major. I'm pro-choice. I'm a liberal. I'm a feminist. And I'm an advocate of the philosophy of objectivism. Thanks, Kay and Honey, for setting us up. I look forward to another conversation with Kay in which I will defend the view that abortion is justified. However, for the context of this debate, I am simply taking the negation of Kay's defense of abortion's moral impermissibility. In terms of donations, I know that Honey explained that they were going to donate to Mothers Against Drunk Driving. In part, my donations will go towards living a virtuous life and the Abortion Freedom Fund, which provides medical abortions to people in states where abortion access is being restricted. My intentions for the conversation are to stay exclusively on substance relevant to Kay's defense and to keep the conversation precise and productive as not to waste time, as I have the interest of addressing multiple different areas of contention I have with Kay's view. For some presumptive points and predictions for how I think, from my perspective, I usually think that Aristotelian metaphysics are either unclear, not true, or at worst kind of seem like magic. but maybe we'll investigate that. Not change our mind. Generally, neo-Aristotelian ethical projects that are seemingly plausible either do not defend the view that abortion is unjustified or explicitly defend the opposite, that sometimes abortion is good. From what I've heard about Kay's view, there seem to be a lot of counterexamples to the principles which make abortion wrong. So maybe we'll explore that. And also, for context, Kay's view and Aristotelian views more broadly are very complex and very robust, and they require a lot of clarity to keep track of all the different moving parts. So, if at some point in the debate you're like, where are we at in the conversation? Don't worry, it's kind of going to feel like that. That's not a problem. Big challenges for Kay's view are really three things: to define and defend clearly. First, under what conditions an action is good and bad. Second, to explain why someone should adopt this moral framework. And third, to explain why this moral framework concludes that abortion is unjustified. Now, at face value, before cross, looking at the argument, it was something along the lines of like, if some action is good, then the action would meet certain criteria for relating to homeostatic property clusters, like a certain kind of homeostatic property cluster. And that abortion, when you perform the action of abortion, doesn't satisfy the conditions or have the correct relationship to this homeostatic property cluster. And as such, it's not good. Now, first point that we're going to investigate in the conversation is what exactly the homeostatic property cluster is. Okay. In premise one, like in the presentation of it, you'll see that he said if some action is good, then it would have a certain relationship to a certain homeostatic property cluster. But in premise one, there wasn't like even the conditions for the homeostatic property cluster laid out. So identifying what exactly the homeostatic property cluster is going to be a challenge. Identifying exactly what kind of relationship an action has to have to a homeostatic property cluster is going to be another thing. Additionally, after clarifying what the homeostatic property cluster is and what kind of relationship I should have to it, we then have to clarify why someone should even care about the homeostatic property cluster and having a relationship to it. Again, like, a lot of complicated stuff said, eudaimonic satisfaction, virtue realizability, synthetic reductionism, all those things we're going to investigate. I'm just excited to dive in. So I see my time.
All right, give me a second to set up the timer. We're going to do 50 minutes. Normally we do 25 each, but since we're just doing his view, we're going to do 50.
Yeah, cool. Yes.
Oh,
just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I got to change the background. You're good. All right.
Okay.
On your first word?
Okay,
Awesome.
cool. So do you want me to address some of the points that you made in the opening, or? Yeah, so premise one is if an action is morally good, then that action optimally satisfies the predicate XYZ, where the extension of XYZ is such that it includes homeostatic property clusters.
Satisfies the what?
The predicate XYZ, where its extension is such that it includes homeostatic property clusters.
Right. And the homeostatic property the homeostatic property cluster in question was what? Like what homeostatic property cluster has to be satisfied?
Yeah, so I don't think that a question about what homeostatic property cluster has to be satisfied is really a good question. I think maybe what you mean to ask is what are the facts that plausibly fall under the extension such that it classifies it, or rather it's classified as a homeostatic property cluster, in which case here are the
Well, that's not,
right?
that was,
So one of the
well, hold on, real quick, that's not, is it lagging for me? Is that just me? I think it's lag. Well, hold on, the question
you're not
isn't
lagging on
framed.
my end.
I think you're lagging.
I might be lagging.
Am I the? Yeah, I think you're lagging. To clarify, that's not. I just want to be really clear. A homeostatic property cluster, as such, is not what I'm asking about. Like I know what a homeostatic property cluster is. The question I'm asking is what is the? You said a certain homeostatic property cluster. Like what is the homeostatic property cluster that's relevant to the argument? Because like presumably, plants and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Property cluster.
That's what I was answering. Right. So
okay.
Yeah, I wasn't about to define what a homeostatic property cluster. Not to tell you all the facts that extensions I homeostatic property cluster. No, or can you guys hear me?
You are, but I just want a list of the properties contained in the cluster.
Okay, give me 1 second. Seems like it's lagging.
to clarify, guys,
Okay,
I
am I
do
good now?
just
Am I good
yeah,
now?
I just want to yeah, I just want a list of it keeps lagging. um, to clarify, I just want a list of the properties. I don't want like a kind of a motivation for why that's relevant just yet. I just want a list of the properties before I get to why it's relevant. Oh my god, thank you for the dinosaur. Holy shit. Thank you for the Bronchiosaurus, guys. Can we pause the debate? I always pause. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I paused the time. We'll wait till his internet's fixed. Someone said in the comments that Detroyer fan is Julian. I'm gonna let him up, and he can just take over my spot.
Oh, neat.
Truth.
Okay, what's up, Julian? Thanks for coming.
Divinity's already losing.
Yo, can we get a new mod, bro? Fuck this scumbag. Yo. Yo, this is Mr. Everything's Relative, right?
Everything is relative.
Everything is relative. Liam, just say HPC. No, I'm gonna say homeostatic property cluster. Someone say that's not Julian. Fucking this guy's in chat talking about who won. The debate's like not even going on. They're like, who won?
Okay, feel free to send the moderator gifts.
Yeah. Oh hell no. Can we get a homeostatic property cluster count? Liam, what's the name of the charity you're donating to? I don't know if it's considered a charity, but it's the Abortion Freedom Fund.
Yeah, and any funds donating to me will go to Planned Parenthood.
So basically, but abortion freedom proceeds, but essentially it provides medical abortion access to people in states who are legal, or
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Am I still lagging or am I good?
You're good.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I think the last place that we left off at was you asking me to list out the facts that plausibly fall under the extension.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so here are the facts, right? So what does it mean to say that an action is morally good and what does it mean to say that an action is morally bad? I already explained previously that those things instantiate properties in the world, and those properties include things like eudaimonic contribution as one. Another one is something like virtue manifestation as another one. The other one is something known as phronetic coherence. Another one is well-being optimization, for example. And these four facts. It's not the case that these facts are exhaustive of the extension of the predicate, but rather these facts are facts that plausibly fall under the extension such that it's identifiable as an HPC cluster.
Right. Okay. So, and to clarify, in premise one, the argument was like, if some action is good, then it satisfies the predicate XYZ extension. But presumably by XYZ, you're just talking about good, like the goodness predicate extension is that homeostatic property cluster.
Yeah, so when I talk about the extension of the predicate, what I'm talking about there very specifically is talking about, you understand the concept of intentional and extensional semantics, right?
Well, I understand, I understand this is like the Cornell.
Yeah, so that's the sense in which I'm using it. And also, it's not the case that my view is a Cornell realist view, although you can say that it uses aspects about Cornell realism insofar as it talks about property clusters, for example, as identifiable with moral properties. But it's not the case that my view is like a Cornell realist view.
Right. It's similar insofar as that the extension of the predicate good is these things.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. Looking at HPC, looking at this property cluster, by eudaimonic contribution, do you mean eudaimonic contribution to you, or do you mean just like any eudaimonic contribution? Like if I contribute to your eudaimonia, that's also part of the cluster.
Yeah, so I don't take it that the facts that are constitutive of eudaimonic satisfaction, contribution, or flourishing, I don't take it that any of those facts are going to have a satisfaction relation to any agent's attitudes. In fact, I don't even take it that those facts are going to depend on our psychology in any
I'm
way,
not asking that. I'm just
right?
asking if it's relative. Like, for example, if I help your
And
life
so
out.
by virtue of that, I don't actually adopt any relativistic accounts of eudaimonia. Rather, I take it that when I talk about eudaimonic contribution, I'm talking about the relevant facts that promote the flourishing of a rational agent. And we can
Right.
we can sort of go over those facts if you
Right,
want.
I wasn't asking about psychology. I'm saying, so yes, if I contribute to your eudaimonia, that's part of the cluster.
What do you, so when the way that I'm interpreting that question, when you
Yes.
say I contribute to, I'm just getting clear on the question before I answer the question with a yes or no. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so the way that I'm interpreting the question when you ask me if I contribute to your eudaimonia, I'm interpreting that as, in some sense, a relativistic account of eudaimonia, unless that's not what you mean.
Yeah, like typically eudaimonia is relative to like a particular animal and its particular final causation. But if that's not what
Oh,
you
so
mean,
you're using relativistic in that sense. Okay, so yeah, I think that there are facts that are conducive to human flourishing, and there are facts that are conducive to non-human flourishing.
right? But the important point is like, according to the property cluster, right? If I contribute to your like your flourishing, your eudaimonia, does that fall under the property cluster of that which is good?
If I contribute to your flourishing, what do you mean there?
Like I make your life better per whatever whatever the functional standard is for your life, whatever account of
I
your name.
make your life better by whatever the functional standards are. I don't really understand what that means.
Okay, well, actually, let's just dissect all these terms. So, by eudaimonia contribution, presumably, yeah. What do you mean by eudaimonia? Just to clarify.
Yeah, so by eudaimonia, you can think about eudaimonia as the total comprehensive set of well-being facts given a specific agents that exist, for example, right? And I
Well,
take it that, and also when I talk about eudaimonic satisfaction or eudaimonic contribution more specifically, I'm talking about those types of actions that promote the flourishing of rational agents, where flourishing more specifically is understood as the full actualization of the rational
yeah.
and whatever other capacities that the respective agent has.
Right. So, important point of clarity, just so we're clear. When you describe eudaimonia as the total set of facts relative to the well-being of a given agent, I just want to clarify that like eudaimonia is not this abstract thing. Eudaimonia is relative, like to a particular object. You might say that like they have the same like universal standards for each of them individually to promote their eudaimonia given their nature, but like eudaimonia is relative insofar as it's indexed to a particular living, rational animal, right?
I don't think that the facts that make up what it means for something to be flourishing is going to be relativistic. But if you're saying that there's a type of relation that obtains between agent psychology and these facts, like maybe you could say there's a type of, I don't know, a type of relation, let's just say, between a given agent psychology and those facts. I agree with you if that's what you mean by relativistic. But if by relativistic you mean that the facts that are constitutive of flourishing are relativistic, I don't agree with that.
I'm not meaning relativistic, just to clarify, like psychologically. I'm saying like if eudaimonia is eudaimonia of a particular rational animal, right?
Yeah, so
Okay,
again,
so
I
it's
think that
relative in
there
that
are
sense.
yeah, so again, I think that there are facts about human flourishing, and I also think there are facts about non-human flourishing.
Right. I just want to clarify, but that's yes, like eudaimonia is eudaimonia of a particular human being.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. And eudaimonia exclusively refers to human flourishing, or does it encompass other animals and plant life?
Yeah, so I think the concept of flourishing can apply to other non-human animals. I think even plants, for example, can flourish in their own ways. For example, like a plant
No,
that
I agree,
grows.
but eudaimonia specific.
Right,
Yes.
but I don't think that the concept of happiness is applicable, for example, to agents that don't have a particular nature. In fact, I actually
Okay.
have a background belief about, for example, I actually take it that the moral properties, right? Those things are they have when I say that they have a synthetic relation to the more or rather
I'm sorry,
to
I don't think
the
this is particularly relevant to my question. So it's just a yes. Like there's eudaimonia
no,
exclusively refers to.
I can
I just
explain the
needed it. I
relevance.
just needed a yes. Like yes, it is just about humans.
Yes, but
Okay. I
why
don't
did you
need like an
stop me
explanation
from
because I just wanted a yes. I didn't want like the explanation behind why.
you don't want the ex
Get clear on the. I'm
okay,
just trying
I
to get
guess you
clear on
don't
like what the view is. Yeah.
okay, I guess you don't want the explanation there.
Right. Okay. So in the list of the property clusters, or in the list of the properties in the cluster, you told me eudaimonia contribution, virtue manifestation, phonetic coherence, and well-being optimization. Now, you described eudaimonia as the totality of the facts about an agent's well-being. Presumably, virtue manifestation is just manifesting the things which contribute towards an agent's well-being, right?
Yeah, so by virtue manifestation, what I'm talking about specifically is a type of action that expresses or, in some sense, reinforces the stable dispositional tendencies of a given agent in such a way where it allows them to realize those properties or those facts about flourishing.
Right. It's like things that are instrumental in eudaimonia. Okay. And then phonetic coherence, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so by frenetic coherence, I'm talking about an action specifically that a fully virtuous agent would do. And what I mean by virtuous agent, I guess it's important to sort of go over the background commitments that I have about virtues. There's a part about my meta ethics that's constructivist in some sense, especially when it comes to virtue properties and how those things relate to facts about flourishing. But I think that virtue, you can think about, so are you familiar with like veridical visual perceptual relations in phenomenology, for example?
I just need a definition, man. I think we
Yeah, it's
can
important. That's what I'm giving you right now, but I'm asking you this so that I can know
just
what I need to clarify and what I
explain it
don't
though. You
need to
need to
clarify. So
just
do
explain
you
what you
know
need
the
to clarify.
concept? Yes or no?
Just explain it. Yeah. Just explain it.
Okay, so you're not. I just want to know if you know it so I know what to explain or not.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
tell me.
Explain it. Just explain it.
You are familiar with it or you're not?
Just explain. I'm telling you to explain it because the people, even if I'm familiar with it, aren't going to understand what you're saying.
Okay, so you, what the fuck?
So I'm asking
Okay.
you to explain so people can know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
so when I talk about veridical visual perceptual relations, I'm talking about a type of relation that stands causally to external normative properties in such a way where the agent in question is able to access those external normative properties and that those things in some sense motivate the agent to act in a particular way. And so you can think about virtues as those types of or facts or those types of, you could say, actions that express or reinforce or in some sense are connected to those those visual perceptual relations that obtain given specific phenomenological properties about the agent.
Right. Okay. So I just want to clarify. Whenever you say an action is good if the action satisfies the good, like the predicate of good extension, and then you give me, now we've cleared up what the homeostatic property cluster is. Is my action not good if I frustrate another agent's, eudaimonia contribution, virtue manifestation, etc.?
Yeah, so by an action being wrong or not good, all I mean to say there is that the action fails to instantiate these properties, in which case those properties might include things like facts about human flourishing, for example, or if the action is something that manifests as a vice, for example, or if the action is something that violates or is it's contravening to, let's say, rational deliberation, or it undermines rational agency. All of these actions are actions that I take to be wrong.
Right. I just want to clarify though, when you talk, given that we established that eudaimonia, virtue manifestation, well-being optimization, given that we established that these are relative insofar as it's, all these different things of a particular human being, if my actions do not instantiate the extension to another, animal, like if my actions don't contribute to the manifestation of your virtue or don't contribute to optimizing your well-being, in virtue of that, is the action not good? Or is it?
Yeah, so this is why I was very, very specific about the clarification that I made previously about whether or not the facts that are constitutive of flourishing are relativistic or whether or not there's a type of relation that obtains between an agent and the facts that are constitutive of flourishing. And I take those two things to be relevantly distinct. So to say that if I don't do something that's conducive to your well-being and to imply that the facts about the person's well-being, for example, or flourishing are relativistic would be a mischaracterization in my view. Now, if you're asking me something like, do I think that there are things that people have obligations to do that are in accord with these facts that include other agents? The answer is yes.
That's not what I'm asking. So when you say that an action, if it's good, instantiates, I'll just say like eudaimonia contribution, because the other things can kind of be summed up as like, some relation to that. Okay. If my action fails to establish eudaimonia contribution, the question is, are you understanding eudaimonia in the sense of my eudaimonia, like my flourishing and my eudaimonia contribution? Or are you talking about it broadly where it's like, in order for an action to be good, it must instantiate eudaimonia contribution to other things and their, flourishing?
Yeah, so it also could include facts about your individual flourishing. It also could include it also could include facts about other people's flourishing, right? So like, for example, right, let's say that one of the facts that plausibly fall under this extension is that you should be a rational person, for example, right? And let's say that you have a friend and this friend is a complete dumb fuck, right? And they just have no type of motivation whatsoever to educate themselves. And you just watch them do that, right? I think you're doing something wrong there. I think you should motivate the person to get, better educated and to be a rational person, a rational actor.
But the source, I just want to clarify, the source of the wrongness is in virtue of the fact that you are not contributing to your eudaimonia, in that, like, part of what it means for you to flourish is to promote other people's flourishing? Or are you saying that goodness itself, like eudaimonia contribution itself, is not just about me, it's also about other people, not
Yeah,
in
it's not just about me, it's also about other people. That's correct. It's not just the case that the facts that are constitutive of my eudaimonia, or rather eudaimonia for me, are only about me. There are other facts or other factors at play.
Right. Okay, so given that you're saying that my actions, if they are good, must satisfy, eudaimonia contribution to other people, I have a question. So how does your view deal with conflicts of interest in which, maximizing my flourishing would contradict the flourishing of another human being? How does your view adjudicate that?
I'm not really understanding the question. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so presumably the argument for why abortion is wrong is your premise too, saying that abortion does not satisfy the predicate of, instantiating the homeostatic, any of the properties in the cluster, right? Now, obviously, if you look at a woman, getting an abortion, presumably you would agree that it contributes maybe to her financial well-being. You'd say that it contributes to her, ability to be self-directive and therefore like continue to, optimize her well-being. There are, ways in which getting an abortion promotes the well-being of the mother. But you're going to say, presumably, that getting an abortion fails to instantiate these things in the instance of the child. And so in that case, there is a conflict of interest between promoting my personal eudaimonia contribution, my flourishing, and promoting the flourishing of child. So if it's the case that goodness, under your view, extends to, things are good insofar as you promote other people's flourishing, then how does your view adjudicate what to do in cases in which an action would, help your flourishing but not help another person's?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. The way that we address these sorts of cases is just going to be by way of the facts that are going to be in alignment with whatever the mother is doing or whatever courses of action the mother is doing, and whether or not those things are in alignment with an architecture in such a way where those things tend to produce what's called a deeper integration of the relevant normative facts and a deeper meaning or a deeper sense of well-being. So what we can infer from this view is that not getting an abortion, right? Those things have a characteristic tendency. And the characteristic tendency is that they tend to preserve and, in fact, in some sense, activate or motivate a very rich cluster of natural dispositional properties. Okay. And those things could include facts like generativity, for example. They could also include facts like emotional coherence, for example, like resilience, long-term meaning making is another example. Like there's a lot of things that not getting an abortion activates when you take those courts of action. And it's not the case that those action or those traits are arbitrarily picked, but rather there's a causal mechanism that is regulating the co-occurrence or the coextensional nature of those relevant facts or those functional architectures. And so when we assess those types of, I guess you could say contradict, or excuse me, I don't know what the exact word that you used to describe the case was, but when we assess those sorts of cases, we assess it, number one, on the basis of consonance to flourishing, and we assess it on how well they express the functional architecture of the human organism itself.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, in adjudicating conflicts of interest, right? You said that we appeal to the standard of deeper well-being integration.
Yeah.
Right, and what is the standard for deeper well-being integration?
It's just going to be the things that I listed.
That's the standard, because presumably it's the same extension for good you gave earlier, right?
No, so, okay, I guess I could explain it this way. So, given my background belief about being a dispositionalist about moral properties, I take it to be the case that humans, right, by virtue of our nature, we're going to have certain de re properties that are true about us. And those things are going to, in some sense, allow us to have access to these de re dispositional properties in such a way where we're able to access, or excuse me, there's a type of relation that obtains between us as objects and external normative properties. But those things are regulated by our functional mechanisms as living entities, for example, right? And so when I talk about deeper well-being, I'm talking about, you could say, a certain kind of full actualization or realization of some given thing's nature with respect to those dispositional tendencies, realizing those normative properties.
Is that not just the same thing that you listed out eudaimonic satisfaction was?
No. So when I said eudaimonic satisfaction, what I said specifically was the type of action where it's, or rather the facts that are or rather it's consisted of facts that are constitutive to some beings flourishing.
Is that not what a virtue is? Like a disposition, which when you instantiate the correct kind of relationship, you like human beings instantiate a correct kind of relationship to what you described as the external normative properties. It contributes to eudaimonia. Is that not what a virtue is?
You kind of lost me there. I didn't really understand what you were saying.
Well, actually, I'll say this. So, what's the difference between the deeper well-being integration and virtue realizability? What's the difference between that?
Oh, yeah, sure. So there's a distinction. I don't know if I would say they're different concepts, but there's a slight distinction between the concepts. So by deeper well-being, Max, or I guess you could say deeper well-being, let's just call it. What I'm saying there more specifically is talking specifically about whether or not the action in question expresses the functional architecture of the human being in question. But it's not the case that all of the facts that are relevant to, let's say, the virtue dispositional tendencies of some agent always express the functional architecture of the human. Does that make sense? So there's like a very slight distinction there, but so they're distinct in the same sense that like, for example, like, when mind-body dualists say that there's a distinction between the mind and the body, but it's not the case that they're separate. It's that type of relationship there.
Okay, so to clarify then, the history behind the objection I just gave was that if it's the case that in order for some action to be good, right, in saying that it causes the necessary or instantiates the required properties to be considered good, that includes properties like the flourishing of other human beings, the well-being of others, the creation of virtues in others, right? And so if it's a case that an action in part instantiates good things for you, like instantiates, I won't say good things, in part instantiates, well-being optimization, virtue manifestation for you, but it's the case that it hurts or harms or doesn't instantiate those properties for another person. I asked, what is it that resolves the conflict of interest in saying that that action is actually good? And then you appeal to virtue manifestation, right? Like essentially that is what it is. It's like you said that the character of not getting an abortion is more not virtuous than it is virtuous. That's what you're saying?
Not exactly. So that's not really an accurate characterization of what I said. What I said more specifically was not to describe what virtue manifestation is simplicator. In fact, I just pointed out the distinction, the slight distinction between virtue manifestation as a fact that falls under the extension and deeper meaning as another fact that's a property of humans as a dispositional tendency. So it's not the case that my answer to the question was just about the relevant, you could say, virtue manifestation facts implicator. Rather, what I was saying was that the assessment, right, the normative assessment that you're going to give, given that case specifically, is going to be based on consonance to flourishing and the functional architecture of the human being.
You're flourishing, right?
When you say you're flourishing, are you using that to indicate, or rather I could say, are you using that linguistic token to indicate a relativistic understanding of the term flourishing?
Relative insofar as I'm talking about you as a rational animal.
If that's what you mean by relativistic, and you're not saying that
It's not about psychology. That's not about psychology.
And you're not saying that the facts that are constitutive of flourishing are relativistic, then yes.
Well, if it's the case that presumably like what it means to flourish, it's like this particular animal was like we already established this. Like flourishing is relative insofar as it's particular animals which flourish, right?
Yeah, so it seems like we've already sort of gone over these questions, but I guess I'll just answer it again. So my previous answer that I gave to this question was simply this, right? So I agree that there's a type of relation that obtains between, let's say, given facts about an agent's psychology and the external normative properties that are constitutive of flourishing. But, well, look, you're saying, okay, so then I don't understand the question then. So what are you saying?
The whole point is that the concept of flourishing and the concept of virtue realizability, flourishing and virtues and their instantiations are relative to a particular animal, right? Like there's not like floating virtues out there in the world. There are virtues of a particular animal's actions or of a particular animal's, flourishing, right?
Yes, I think there are facts about human flourishing, and I think there are also facts about non-human flourishing.
Right, but the important point is that flourishing is relative to agents. That's the point I'm trying to make.
No,
won't say
it's
age. I won't
not
say
the
agents. I'll say
case that it's
rational.
relative to agents.
I'll say rational animals. Is what I'm saying. Flourishing is relative. Sorry, not flourishing. Eudaimonia is relative to rational animals.
It can also apply to non-rational animals. In the
Eudaimonia.
illicit. Oh, you said eudaimonia or flourishing?
Eudaimonia applies strictly to.
Yes, eudaimonia is a property of rational animals,
Okay,
but
so
flourishing can be applicable to non-rational animals.
okay, so continuing with the conversation, just for context, I'm not. I until I explicitly state otherwise, I'm not talking about other animals when I say flourishing. I'm qualified talking about human beings.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So given that, I said in an example in which there's a conflict of interest between my action promoting the flourishing of another individual and an action promoting the flourishing of me, you said that the way that we adjudicate this conflict of interest is by understanding that one action has a deeper well-being integration, and the standard for that was its relationship to my flourishing, right? Like something is more deeply well-being integrating if it promotes my flourishing more, right? Like the standard for evaluating deeper well-being integration is relative to my flourishing. True or false? Yeah, framed exactly like that. I just want a yes or no. The standard for deeper well-being integration is relative to my well-being.
Sorry, I got a phone call. I didn't hear anything that you said in the past 30 seconds. So can you recap what you said?
So my question, I just want a yes or no to this. So yes or no, the standard for deeper well-being integration is relative to your well-being.
The standard for deeper well-being integration is relative to your well-being. Not necessarily. No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay, so how do you adjudicate the conflict of interest when considering the well-being of another person and the well-being of you?
I thought I already answered this question, but I guess I'll give you a sort of modified answer or a different way to explain the answer. So I said that the adjudication there, right, or the normative assessment is going to be based on facts about consonance to flourishing, or you could say things that are not contravening to the flourishing facts or the facts about flourishing. And then the second thing was whether or not those facts are flourishing for the agent.
The person making the decision, right?
Okay, so it is the case that there are facts that are constitutive of the person you could say the person in question who is being adjudicated upon, and it's also the case that there's a homeostatic mechanism, or you could say a pattern of properties that are assessed as you could say across all class or all members of the class of entities that thing belongs to, right? The members of that kind, right? So I can just maybe I can explain this by way of analogy.
I just want to clarify. Just so when you said,
well, I think that this analogy is going to clear up a lot of things.
If I need the analogy,
so do you mind if I
do mind, yeah. So I just want to clarify.
Why would you mind me giving you an analogy? Like what?
Yes, I do mind. That's why I'm continuing to speak. I just want to clarify. You just said
what? Okay.
I don't think that the analogy will be very helpful, given that. Yeah. So look.
You don't even know what the analogy is.
Yeah, I know that. I still think it won't be very helpful. So
how do you know it's not going to be helpful if you don't know what it is?
Because respectfully, you've kind of been rambling a lot. Like I just want yes or no.
I haven't been rambling. I've been giving you very specific, concise, and technical answers.
Okay. Regardless, we can. I don't focus on meta. I want to go this route.
The reason why I'm
we're
offering,
on meta right now. I don't come on, dude.
It's not meta. Wait, let me just get this out, and then I'll let you respond.
I don't understand why you're trying to.
So the reason why I'm offering an analogy is because you've asked me the same question for the past 25 minutes over and over again, and it seems like you're not getting the answer that I'm putting down on the table. That's why I'm offering you an analogy.
Okay, so I'll make this point on meta. So I respond to the meta point you just made, and then we're going back to the line of reasoning the line of questioning that I'm asking. Okay, so the reason why I'm asking you, the reason it's meta is because you're talking about what I said. Okay, so given that, every time I ask you a question regarding these terms, I will ask a yes or no question, and then I'll kind of get an evasive not necessarily, and then I will get, an explanation that also does not make very much sense, and then is also seemingly very pertinent to, being framed in the yes or no way that I framed it earlier, despite you saying it wasn't, is why I'm like trying to drill in on just like getting yes or no's to the question I'm asking. Okay, so when you said that you adjudicate the conflict of interest,
I have given you yes or no's.
Hold on, when you say that you adjudicate the well, yeah, I grant that. I'm saying you give me yes or no's, and then you give me anyway. Point is, when you say that you adjudicate the conflict of interest by appealing to the deeper well-being integration, the point you said is like, well, you do it by appealing to the facts about what is flourishing. Okay, and the question I asked is who's flourishing? Is it a particular animal's flourishing? Is it a particular rational animals flourishing, or are you trying to understand and
What was the answer that I gave?
Right, and you said not necessarily you're flourishing. So I just want to clarify, you're committed
No,
to
that's
saying
not
that,
that's not the only thing that I said in my answer. So can you just sort of reproduce the response that I gave?
okay, now you're trying to change the conversation topic because I want to clarify
What?
this point.
I'm
You're
trying to get clear on
move
if
away.
you understand the response that I gave you. How is
I
that
want to
you
get clear
changing
on
the
what
conversation topic?
I want to get clear on whether or not the standard is your
I
flourishing.
just want to know if you can reproduce the answer
so
that I gave
this
you.
is a true. I probably could. I want an answer.
Wait,
to this
why?
exact
So
comment.
can you tell me?
Why
Can
are
you
you trying to
reproduce?
stop steamrolling?
I'm not
Answer my
steamrolling
question.
you. I'm asking
Yes,
you if
you
you can
are.
reproduce
No
the
more
answer that I
method.
gave
You
you.
are. Yes, you are.
I don't think you remember the response that I gave you.
I remember the response you gave me. I want,
more.
for the sake of clarity,
Can you give me the response?
Hey, stop dodging my question. For the sake of clarity,
I just want to
is
know
it
if
the
you can give me
case?
the response.
Yeah, I grant you want to know that. For the sake of clarity,
No more
is it the
method,
case?
guys. Just
So the reason, okay, so
Why
the
are you
reason why I'm
steamrolling right
asking,
now?
I'm not steamrolling at all.
we've
Yes,
clarified
you
that
are.
it's not your flourishing case. So if you want to quickly give the
No,
other
wait, hold on,
conditions,
wait,
then
just hold on,
we
just
can
hold on,
discuss.
just hold on.
What
So
the fuck is going on? Like,
the reason why I'm
what?
asking him if he can reproduce my answer is because he's asking me a question that I already answered. So I want to see if he actually is tracking the conversation and if he knows what the answer was. So just go ahead and reproduce the answer.
This is a new formulation of the question I'm asking.
No, it's not. It's the same
It is.
question that you asked me previously.
I'm about to ask you whether the standard for deeper well-being integration is a standard in which you just consider your flourishing, or a standard in which you consider the flourishing of you and the other person.
Yeah, you asked me that question previously, and can you reproduce the answer that I gave
And
you?
you said what? What's the
So
answer?
you can't reproduce the answer.
Why
Okay,
are you
cool.
on meta? Answer the question.
Right. So the answer that I gave you previously that you can't reproduce for some reason, right? It's just simply this. So the adjudication, right? Those things are going to be
Option
based
one or
on
option two? Stop rambling.
What are you talking about? How
Why
is that
are
a
you
ramble?
rambling? Just
I'm
give
not
me answer
rambling.
one or
I'm giving
answer
you an
two.
answer to the question. If you stop
I want
interrupting me
option
and
one or
charging me
two.
with rambling instead of
Option
actually
one or
letting me
two.
understand the question, or rather elucidate on the
I don't know
question.
why you have these like long-winded soliloquies in which you can just give
It's
me
not
option one or
long-winded. It's
option
very
two.
technical.
It
If you
is
can't track
long-winded.
it, then
It's
you don't.
long-winded.
If you
because
can't track,
unnecessarily
if you can't track the things
you
that
are
I'm saying, that's
unable
on
to
you.
specify
And
be
you've
clear.
already demonstrated that you can't
Option
track it
one
because
or
when I asked you to
option
reproduce
two.
my answer, you
Stop
couldn't
running.
reproduce the answer.
Option
Okay.
one.
And also, that's a false dichotomy as well, by the way, just to be clear, right? So
What are you talking about?
just the case. It's not just the case that it's
Now
either.
it's a false dichotomy.
Yeah, it
Wait.
is.
Everybody stop talking. Okay, so just specify what's relevant to doing the assessment and just give a very short answer. Say,
So holy shit.
Yeah,
all
that's
I want-
totally. That's
all
what
I
I've been
want-
trying to.
all I
That's what I've
want-
been trying
all I
to
want-
do.
hold
But
on,
he
I just-
keeps stopping me for some reason.
I'll tell you why I'm stopping you. I'm gonna re-ask my question.
I don't
and
need
answer
you to tell me
exactly
why you're
the-
stopping me. I need you to stop stopping
you're
me so
confused
I can
for some
respond to the
reason.
question. I'm not
Respond to my
confused at all.
question in the format in which I want you
No,
to.
I'm going to respond to the question however I want.
Well, you're not responding to it in a clear way. You're dodging the question the way.
A clear way to you. I'm
A
responding to
clear
it
way
in a very
given the
clear way.
framing of the question. What are you talking
Okay.
about?
Anyway, so I'm just going to respond to the question, right? So the question here is simply this, right? So if we have some case where some agent is doing something that's conducive to their flourishing, and it's the case that they're doing something that's harmful to another being's flourishing, how is it the case that K's view adjudicates this, right? What's the sort of normative assessment that he gives when we have these sorts of cases? And then the response that I gave previously was very simple. I said that, and oh, by the way, I asked you to give me an example, and then the example that you gave me was about a mother who was doing things that were conducive to her well-being, her flourishing, but she got an abortion, which is not conducive to the fetus's flourishing, for example. And then I explained to you how it's not the case.
Are we getting to the standard sometime soon?
I'm about to give it to you.
It's really
So,
long-winded,
and then I
so,
explained,
like,
and then
it's
I
just
explained to
ramble
you, I'm just doing this for clarity, so we're all clear on what the conversation is. Because
Yet
we
to
just
get to the point, so
got
it's not
lost
very
into
clear,
like a
right?
meta ramble, right? So in any case, right? And then I explained to you the fact that that normative assessment is going to be based on facts that are consonant with flourishing, for example, number one. And then the second one is whether or not the life
Flourishing of
that's
who?
at
What
play.
the
Stop
fuck? This is
talking.
the question.
I'm still talking. I'm still
You
talking.
didn't answer my question.
I'm still talking. I'm literally answering your
maybe you'll
question
get
right
to
now.
it. Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
Okay,
maybe
so
you'll get
just pipe down so I can
to it.
finish
Go for it, man.
responding.
No, maybe
okay?
you'll get to it eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, so then stop talking so I can respond. You
Well, I'm
good?
sorry. It's a really long-winded preamble. To
Are
the
you
point,
okay?
guy.
Are you okay, Liam?
I can
Can
almost
you not
predict
track
you
things
on
that are
the-
more than 5 minutes? Are you okay?
Just go for it, man. No, yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
then stop talking so I can
Yeah,
give
go
it
for
to
it,
you.
man. It's all you, man. Go for it.
Okay, great. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay, cool. So anyways, one of it is that it's based in facts about consonance to flourishing. And then the other one is that it's whether or not the life or facts about the life aligns with the architecture, or rather the functional architecture of the human organism at all. And then the third thing that I said, right, with respect to the normative assessment is whether or not that action is consistent with the pattern that the homeostatic mechanism maintains across members of its kind. Okay, so if it's not the case that the action in question doesn't satisfy one of these conditions, then the action is more than likely wrong.
So, is that option 1 or option 2, okay?
I don't have to give you option 1 or option 2. I answered the question sufficiently. What are you talking about?
Hey, yo, so let me just say, you just went on this fucking long-winded preamble, unskippable cutscene to tell me that you didn't answer my question.
Stealing Eric's rhetoric? That's really cringe. Anyways, can you reproduce the response that I gave you?
No, I can't reproduce the fucking 5-minute unskippable cutscene.
Of course you can, because you're not even listening to the answer.
You're not listening. You're not listening. What I can do. So what I can do to you?
You're not listening.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. What I can? Oh no, I can't speak. So
wait.
I let you go on this fucking long-winded explanation. I can't even speak now.
Wait, okay,
I can't speak in my cross-examination despite the fact that you decided to not answer my question. So let's just get really clear. Julian, hold on. Let's just get really clear, just to clarify. Look, just to clarify the question, right? When you say that the adjudication of the conflict of interest is done by looking at the facts of flourishing, my question is relevant to your answer you just gave me. The question being facts about who's flourishing, right? Is it exclusively the actors flourishing, or is it inclusive of the fetuses flourishing, right? Now, instead of giving me a option 1 or option 2, by the way, true dichotomy, if you deny that, like, I'd love to fucking hear option 3, okay? Given that you did not answer my question 1 or 2, well, instead you told me, well, actually, what we have to look at is one of 3 things, okay? The consonants to flourishing, the archetype of the behavior relative to human functionality, and whether or not the action or the properties instantiated thereof are consistent with the homeostatic mechanism. I heard what you said. I wrote it down, right? And guess what?
You missed the last part.
Guess what? I just repeated the consistent.
No, you didn't. You missed the last part.
Across the species, right? Across the species.
Okay, and then so now you understand that. So whether or not the
why are you
action.
cutting me off? I heard you. Look, I heard you. Now I want
Did you not just talk about being long-winded?
So now I want. Hold on.
Now look at who's being long-winded.
So now I'm long-winded. As a matter of fact, I'm addressing everything you said. Now I want you to give me.
Funny.
Do you reject the dichotomy that you are either just considering my flourishing or you're considering the flourishing of me and other people?
Yeah, so I already answered this question like way back in the conversation again, right? You're just like, I don't know if you like doing this tactic where you have, I don't know if you're doing this tactic where you have
option
no
1 or 2. Why are you on meta right now?
Why are you talking over me?
Because you're on meta.
Stop talking. It's not your turn to speak. It's not your turn to speak. Why are you still speaking?
Why are you talking about meta?
Why are you still talking?
Option 1 or option 2?
Is there a moderator?
Yes, okay, mod. Is this meta? Is this not meta?
Okay, great. So stop talking so I can respond to your dumb fuck points that you made.
Let's ask the mod.
Question.
Yo, mod, do you think this is meta? Do you think this is meta?
Not only did you change the question, but you also didn't track the initial response that I gave you. Okay, so let me talk.
So, do I just live in like a fictional universe?
Why is he still talking? Hello? Are you good? Why are you still talking? Stop talking.
Like,
why are you on meta? Like, what the fuck? Stop talking.
Is it option 1 or 2, K? Why are you focusing on meta?
Mute this guy so I can talk. Mute this guy so I can talk.
Mute the guy so you can grandstand and talk about meta.
Mute him so I can talk. He's stopping me from giving a response for some odd reason.
I'm stopping you from talking about meta, bro.
It's almost like he's terrified of the things that I'm going to say.
So instead of meta, bro.
Hey guys, let Julian mod, please.
Okay, great. So stop talking so I can respond.
Yo, let him mod.
Okay,
stop talking.
Where's your mod? Like, what? What are you fucking doing?
He's crashing out right now. He's crashing out because he's scared of the answer that I'm going to give him.
Employ the mute.
Am I like in this alternate reality where I didn't answer?
Yes, you're in an alternate reality where you can't seem to shut the fuck up.
Where I didn't reproduce what
you're like in a reality where you can't seem to shut your mouth when people are responding to the dumb fuck questions that you ask them.
Yeah, well, we're talking about substance, not meta, right?
Holy fuck. You're literally prolonging. Okay, so this is what he does, right? Is that
no, you're on meta. You're trying to grant.
This is what he does. This is what he does. He literally engages in meta, and then when I respond to the meta, he goes, "Oh, you're engaging in meta." Like, what are you talking about?
Guys, your guys' mics are a lot louder than Julian's, so you guys can't hear him. Please let him mod.
Okay, great. Okay, so
look, I don't think this will be helpful for 2 reasons. The first reason is it's quite clear that Kay is taking into account multiple people's eudaimonia when he's making these assessments, or multiple people's flourishing when he's making these assessments. But the point is, like, you have to specify how you're weighing the flourishing.
Yeah, that's the fucking question, bro.
No, that was not the question, right? So the question was not.
Oh my god, there's a series of questions.
Okay, so just calm down, right? Julian just actually made the question extra clear for you because you have an inability to make your question clear. Okay, so the question was not how you specify. Okay, that's fine. We can just not focus on that.
Just specify the adjudicating standard. Okay?
So, anyways, back to the question, back to the actual substance of the conversation.
Now just specify the answer.
That's what I'm doing. Holy shit! Like, why am I getting? Okay, so in any case, right? So the specification on whatever. So just to be clear, the question that you're asking me is how do we specify on the facts that are conducive to an individual's flourishing versus the facts that are conducive to the species' typical flourishing. Just to be clear, that's the question you're asking me. I just want to be extra clear about the question before I give my answer.
Specifically, the question I'm giving you, right, is that I grant that under your view, you consider constants of flourishing, the archetype of the human function, and whether or not the action is consistent with the homeostatic mechanisms across the species. I understand you consider those things. By what standard do you consider those things?
By what standard do I consider what things? The facts about flourishing?
The things you just told me were relevant to adjudicating the conflict of interest.
Okay, so you're asking me, so yes, just to be
Standard.
clear, I'm just trying to get clear on the question. Yes or no? Are you asking me the question that Julian asked me, which is to specify the conditions under which some facts count as flourishing for an agent and some facts count as flourishing for the species typical kind?
No, I'm not fucking asking for that. What I'm asking for is the standard by which you take everything you just told me to consider and then conclude that the action is actually something that I should do, given that the action has a conflict of interest between my flourishing and another individual's. What is
The action is something that you should actually do? That's not what you asked me previously, but that's totally fine. I can answer that question anyways. So the answer to the question about why that's something that you should actually do is very, very simple, right? So I have a view where I think human beings as functional architecture, or excuse me, rather as functional beings are both biopsychophysical organisms, and we also have like normative functions, and those normative functions have a ground in relation to the types of entities or the types of property bearing existence that we are. And so in virtue of this fact, there's going to be certain dispositional systems by which we operate as functional mechanisms, right? And it's not, so in the case that you described specifically, right, the facts that are consonant with the flourishing for the agent are going to represent certain dispositional arcs that are a part of that that homeostatic mechanism that's maintained across the species typical function. But it's not the case that whatever those facts are constitutive of all the total set of facts across the species. Does that make sense? And so if you're asking me why you should do this, I presume that you're asking me for a motivation there for the view, just to be clear, or are you asking me a different question there?
I'm not asking you for okay, nothing you just told me. Answer my question, okay?
Holy shit. Then I don't know what your question is then.
Okay, maybe you don't. I'll present it again. So, look, whenever you make the decision about what to do, right? According to your view, according to your view, some action is good, and as a corollary, I should do it if that action satisfies the predicate of instantiating the properties in the homeostatic cluster. Okay. Now, I gave you an instance in which
that's not really true.
Okay. Somehow, okay, sure. Somehow it's not true, but. Nevertheless.
Yeah, it was an inaccurate conceptualization or
characterization. It's 100% not, but I will continue, okay?
It is.
Now, in resolving a conflict of interest in which some action would cause flourishing for me, but cause non-flourishing and harm to another individual, my question was, how does your view, right, in principle, adjudicate the action? What should I do given that I'm harming other people? By what standard do I determine whether to make this action? Now, you told me things to consider, right? You told me whether or not the action was consonant with flourishing. Who's flourishing? Both, right? Still leaving open the question. You told me I should consider the archetype of the human function, and then you told me I have to consider whether or not it's consistent with the homeostatic mechanism across the species. Now, I want the standard by which you consider all of these factors that you said were relevant to determining what to do given that an action causes a conflict of interest. What is the standard to adjudicate?
So again, I don't really understand your question, and this is why I proposed an analogy previously, or rather an argument from analogy, because I knew that it was going to clear up a lot of the confusion that's going on. I feel as though I've answered your question on several occasions. You keep saying that I'm not answering your question, so I'm going to answer it by way of analogy, so that way we can understand what the fuck is going on.
I don't think an analogy will be helpful here.
Well, then I don't understand what his question is, because I feel as though I've answered his question.
Now that I have 9 minutes,
the way that I'm understanding the question is this. He's asking me, right? By what standard do you adjudicate in instances where there seems to be a conflict about the facts concerning flourishing?
Okay. Respectfully, I want to move on to more points, right? So I'm just gonna move on to more points. Okay. So look,
you're just gonna give up on that question?
Oh no, I'm just gonna refer to it back in closing as like a reason why I think your view is wrong. I think we both.
Because you gave me an unclear question that I answered.
That's your interpretation. I don't think the people think that way.
I don't. Wait. What are you? Why are you appealing to the audience? Like, what are you talking about?
Why are you appealing to meta right now? So let me move into the next point.
I'm not appealing to meta. You're trying to say that I lost in a point.
Not allowing me to
because you asked me a question that I answered on several occasions.
I think the point is at a standstill because you're unable to answer my question.
I did answer your question, but I grant that you have the belief that I didn't answer your question, but I definitely.
And I grant that you think you answered it correctly. Now look, premise 2, right? You said abortion does not satisfy the predicate, right?
Then so what is a good analogy? Yeah.
Okay. What is the argument for premise 2?
So You're talking about premise 2 of the original argument, right? That
Mm-hmm.
abortion does not optimally satisfy the predicate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's just going to be by analysis of like most abortion cases and what those abortion cases, or excuse me, rather, what those abortion cases include, right? So I've already kind of gone over this previously when I brought up the facts about what like abortion tends to do, the fact that it tends to preserve, or excuse me, rather, not getting an abortion tends to do, right? And so I said previously that not getting an abortion has a characteristic tendency. The characteristic and tendency might include things like being able to activate a certain, or excuse me, rather, a certain cluster of natural dispositional properties. And I listed those. Like, for example, I said things like long-term meaning making is an example, or things like the principle of generativity, emotional coherence, for example, resilience. All of these things are characteristic tendencies of instances where the mother does not get an abortion, right? And those types of things, again, are maintained by a causal system, right? By which those traits typically co-occur. And the reason why they co-occur is because they express the functional architecture of the human organism in virtue of its dispositional tendencies.
Right. And so you just given me analysis of not getting an abortion and what the dispositional tendencies of that are. So in order to justify premise 2, presumably you have to identify how the dispositional properties, which are, instantiate or tend to be instantiated given an abortion, are worse or something like that. So what is the argument for that?
Are worse? What do you mean by, I don't know what you mean
Yeah,
by
like you're
worse.
presupposing that getting an abortion can't cause, these dispositional properties that you think are good.
No, I'm not presupposing. When you say can't, you're using that in a modal sense? Because I'm not presupposing that. My
They
argument doesn't
don't.
presuppose that
So
whatsoever.
like presumably if it was the case that getting an abortion actually did tend to cause dispositional properties that were, relevant and beneficial to your flourishing, you would say abortions are good, right?
You're asking me, this is like a really stupid question. This is like asking me if it's logically
Meta.
possible that your
What?
view
Why
was
are we
the
on meta
other.
right now?
Wait,
Yes or
wait.
no?
I'm just explaining why you're. Wait, the question that you
Why are
asked
you
me was
fake
really,
laughing? Just
I'm
answer my
about to
question.
explain why the question that you asked
Just
me was
yes
really
or no.
bad. Stop,
What?
stop, stop.
Do you not
responding.
understand the question?
Stop talking.
Why am I
Stop
stopping
talking.
when you're trying to steamroll
Because
for
I'm
meta?
responding to your question and you're
Oh,
still
really? So
talking
you're
for
giving
some
a yes
reason.
or no? Yeah, go
Why?
for it.
Hello? Is there moderation?
Just give me a yes or no. Yeah.
Why is he pressing me?
What's the
when I'm in
moderation for
middle
you
of
choosing to
answering
not
the
answer my question? Are you
Stop talking
serious?
so I can answer the question.
You want moderation so you
Stop
can give me a
talking.
non-yes or no?
Stop talking. You're scared of what I'm going to say.
Yeah, sure, man.
You're
Yes
terrified.
or no, man.
Okay,
Yes or
so
no, man.
stop talking so I can answer the
Yeah,
question.
just yes or no. Yeah, go for it.
It's not a yes or no. I'm going to
Oh,
explain
so
why
the
your question was
like
bad.
not a what the fuck?
Why
The
does
question
he
was
stop? Bro, is there any moderation? Hello? Why is
You
he
want me
still
to
talking?
you want to moderate you not answering my question?
This is like a really bad faith move from
You're
him
not
because
answering
what
my
he's
question.
doing
Are you
is
fucking
he's
serious?
constantly
Just-
interrupting me.
we have
He's constantly interrupting me, and then in the middle of interrupting me, making it seem like I'm the one that's not answering his question.
You're
Bad
not.
faith fucking move. You're literally interrupting me in the middle of me responding to you.
You can answer the question and give like a sentence of elaboration. And
Okay, so then stop talking so I can
You're gonna
answer
give me
the
a
fucking
long-winded
question,
ramble,
okay?
bro. That's
So
what's
the
gonna happen.
answer is very fucking simple, okay? I'm not dodging the question. What I'm doing is I'm trying to explain why it's a bad question to ask, okay? So just take this example. And by the way, the answer to your question is yes, it is logically possible that the mother getting an abortion would in fact be conducive to flourishing. But the reason why that's a bad move and that's a bad question to ask is because you could say the same thing about literally any other fucking theory,
I didn't
okay?
ask that.
You can literally say that, okay, take for example utilitarianism, for example. If I said, hey, what if it was is it logically possible that graping little babies could be utility maximizing? Oh, okay, so therefore your view is committed to this.
Not what I
That's a
asked,
really
bro.
bad fucking
Not what I
question. That's
asked.
exactly what you asked me.
That's not what I asked you. So understand this, right? I asked you if it was the case that
You did ask
getting
me
an
that.
abortion, if it was the case that getting an abortion caused a tendency towards good dispositional properties, would it be the case that abortion would not? Would it be the
Wait,
case
so
it would be
that is what you're
Are
asking
you?
me
And then
then, right?
I let you ramble. Calm down. Calm yourself. Look, you told me you understood what I said as me asking if it was logically possible that it was good. Like in a logically possible world, if it were good, right? Or if it instantiated these properties, would it be good? I'm not asking you simply about like, is it in the logically possible in your view? I'm pointing out this. When you give your argument for premise 2, just to clarify, premise 2 is you're defending that abortion does not instantiate these, eudaimonic satisfaction, virtue realizability, et cetera, et cetera. You're telling me abortion does not cause the properties within this cluster, which you consider to be good. Now, all you told me was that not getting an abortion causes these good properties. You did not establish that getting an abortion doesn't cause those properties. If it's the case, if that getting an abortion does cause these positive homeostatic properties, right? Then it would be the case that you can't justify premise 1 or premise 2. Like implicit in your argument, what you're taking for granted is that not getting an abortion causes these positive properties, and getting an abortion does not cause these properties, such that you can identify that there is an advantage in getting an abortion or in not getting an abortion over getting an abortion. So do you have an argument do you have an argument justifying that getting an abortion does not cause these dispositional properties that you think are good? Do you have an
Yeah,
argument?
so I just want to point out the obvious tracking error that Liam did first and foremost. You said that you weren't talking about something being logically possible, but then you used the term can when you asked me the question, which is obviously indicative of logical
Misinterpret
possibility,
what I just said, but it's fine.
which is really fucking bad. That was like a basic level 1 blunder. The second issue is that you said that if it was the case that the relevant, like let's say whether or not a mother gets an abortion was in fact conducive to flourishing, then would it be the case that that action is morally good? Obviously fucking yes, right? If that was the case, but it's not the case, right? That's like a really bad fucking question to ask. It's like asking like a utilitarian, if it was the case that raping babies was utility maximizing, would it be morally good? Really bad fucking question to ask. Stop talking. Wait.
You're on meta. You're on meta.
Wait. This is a very important point to point out.
But
Okay?
I mean,
And then secondly, and you can do that fake laughing in the background. That's not going to help you.
That's not fake. You're
And
actually
then
dodging my
second, no,
fucking
you're
point.
literally
we
fake
have
laughing.
3 minutes left, so I think
Oh
it's
my
important.
And then secondly, to respond to his dog shit response that he gave me, right?
Why are you so
You could
upset?
say,
Just answer my question.
suppose I'm not upset at all. I don't know why you're trying to
You
gaslight
sound
me
very
right now,
upset.
right? You're
I
the
want
one
you
that's
to just
upset.
engage
I'm
with
not
my
upset
point
at
instead
all,
of
right?
grandstanding.
You're literally interrupting me right now as I'm speaking.
Yes, because you're grandstanding
So-
instead of talking
and
about
literally,
the
I'm
point.
talking. I'm literally about to
On
respond to your
meta,
question.
you're not
Okay?
talking about
Stop
the point.
talking so I can respond. Holy shit.
Respond to the point.
Okay?
Well, when I
Yes,
let you
that's
talk, you
what
didn't talk
I'm
about the point.
doing. That's what I'm doing.
You're not
Holy
talking
shit.
about my point. You're not addressing my
Jesus
point.
Christ.
We have 2 minutes 30 seconds left. I just want this part of Divinity's response. To establish a causal relationship here, you need 2 things. You need what happens in the case you get an abortion with respect to those relevant flourishing properties. You need to know what happens when you don't get an abortion with respect to those.
Yeah, fantastic. Right. So that's what I was.
Compare
Yeah.
the two. And it's
No,
not-
he was actually getting to that, Julian, bro. He's getting to that. Yeah, let him go.
Yes, I was, right? It was very important for me to clarify the first blunder that you made. Okay. Now, secondly, right, given my concept of flourishing, right, and given that my concept of flourishing is central to my account of what it means for some action to be morally good, I don't take it that flourishing is pinned to one trait. Rather, I already explained the fact that it's rather identifiable with a cluster of natural facts. And also, it's given the fact that the cluster is homeostatically maintained in human beings through certain, you could say, biological or social or even rational functions, right? Any and all actions, right, or at least most actions that are inconsistent with these types of facts are the types of actions that are not going to be, are not going to count plausibly as facts that are conducive to flourishing. And so in the case of the mother getting an abortion, it is the case that she's doing an action that's morally wrong simply because she's doing an action that fails to instantiate those properties. And that's just all I take the term wrong to mean. I take the term wrong to pick out an instance where there's a failure of an instantiation of these relevant facts.
Yeah, so that's the whole point. And that's why my question was oriented at the idea that given that you think that not getting an abortion causes these, these dispositional tendencies, et cetera, given that you think that, in order to say that someone should not get an abortion, you are assuming that getting an abortion fails to establish these relevant facts. Now, you just identified that not getting an abortion does establish these relevant facts. That does not necessarily mean that getting an abortion does not also do that thing, right? You need to identify that the properties of the dispositional, instantiations are exclusive towards the action of not getting an abortion. So what is the argument that getting an abortion does not cause the dispositional properties relevant? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so I've already answered this question on several occasions. I guess I'll give you even more responses on top of that. The first answer that I gave to the question was that the fact that the action fails to instantiate those relevant properties is the thing in virtue of which the action is morally wrong. That's just simply all the term wrong means, and that's what the extension of that term is. And then secondly, right, there's a principle in the background that I employ. It's called a type composition principle. Now, what a type composition principle is simply the idea that normative properties, if they were to exist, those things follow types. And if X is a reason because it bears the property P, let's just say, then any other instance of P is going to be reasons why you either should or should not do X. And so if something is, let's say, of type A, for example, and type A is a reason for an agent, then any other thing that or rather follows the same type will also be a reason, all else being equal, for that agent not to do some given course of action. And so given and by the way, we can just sort of, I don't know if we can, yeah, maybe we'll just go over the time a little bit there. But so
there's people asking if you guys want to add some more time to the clock. I'm going to ask
Yeah.
Julian and you guys if that's okay.
Add another 5 hours. Like, let's
no, just add like 10 minutes or something.
Is that fine with everybody on the panel?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
I just don't know if it'll go anywhere.
Right, because you keep asking the same questions over and over. But in any case, so
Like
given
you're
the
saying,
fact,
I
given
think
the
I actually
fact,
think
given
I actually
given
think
given
hold on,
given
I'm
given
addressing
the
100.
fact,
I'm
given the
addressing 100.
fact, given the type composition
I just can't
principle that
address
I
that.
have in the background, okay, it's going to be the case that any, or rather, all else being equal, if some action follows that same type, then there's reasons against that action.
Oh my God, yeah. So in this type composition principle, when you stipulate all else equal, right? I want you to identify. Also, sorry, let me just deconstruct your answer like chronologically, okay? So, in saying that abortion does not instantiate the properties that you think are good, right? Defending that abortion does not do that. What you did was you said not getting an abortion instantiates these good things. Okay. So you're saying, look, getting an abortion is not good because not getting an abortion instantiates these good things. Okay. But that's not a sufficient argument to justify premise 2, that getting an abortion does not instantiate those properties. What you have to do is if you're going to use the supplementary reason you gave, you have to show how the instantiation of these properties are exclusive to the act of not getting an abortion, which you do not do, right? You have to establish the exclusivity of the establishing of the relevant properties. Now, in appealing to this type composition principle, the principle just stipulates all else equal, right? But presumably, like, the whole point is that you have to identify how in the action of getting an abortion, like, all else is equal. Like, you have to identify how it's the case that getting an abortion does not cause the relevant dispositional properties you say are good. For example, when somebody gets an abortion, like, you can very easily establish, like, oh, I mean, in a case where someone's getting an abortion so that they can, save their professional career and not put their life on hold, they're saving their financial well-being for their future, right? So they're being, diligent and patient about what they're doing. When someone gets an abortion, they're saving themselves the ability to remain physically fit and active, right? And that allows them to continue on their fitness journey. Like, all these things are like, you're realizing different manifestations of virtue. You're contributing to your flourishing. You're optimizing your well-being in these ways. Obviously, the action of abortion in these cases, presumably, according to your view, instantiates, properties which are part of the cluster, right? So is it the case that an abortion, like the properties I just gave you, do not instantiate good
You're
properties?
asking me once again. You're asking me a question that I've already answered previously. So I'll just refer you back to the initial response that I gave you the last time you asked me this question. I don't know when you remember when I told you that I have a view where human beings are biopsychosocial organisms, and so in virtue of this fact, they're going to have certain types of normative functions, and there's going to be a ground in relation to the kinds of things that we are. And so I guess I could sort of elaborate on that, since you didn't really track the response that I gave you there, which is a response to your question. Okay, so the response to the question is, whenever you have some instance, let's just say, of a mother getting an abortion, right? I'm not committed to the view that abortion is always contrary to flourishing, but I do think that abortion in most cases is contrary to flourishing. And the reason why that's the case is because the actions that are instantiated whenever an abortion occurs, those actions have a correlation to long-term homeostatic disturbance. And that disturbance is in a flourishing linked system, given the certain, or rather you could say, class of entities that object or that being is a part of. And so examples of this would be things like, maybe, for example, you're severing attachment from your fetus, for example. Another one is that you're suppressing certain types of care responses. I think there's even empirical data to suggest the psychological influences of whenever people get abortions, for example. You're also disrupting for example, something like a meaning-rich identity, for example, right? The fact that the fetus grows up and has its own identity and things like that. And you're also engaging in things like emotional fragmentation. You also might have difficulty forming relationships, all of which are relevant facts that are, in some sense, correlated to disrupting that long-term homeostatic disturbance.
Right. Okay. So if we're specifying, we're talking about most cases of abortion, elective abortion, just to clarify, that's first trimester of the pregnancy, et cetera. And you say that most abortions correlate to disturbance of the the psychosocial functions of a human being and what constitutes.
Same thing that I said previously,
Right.
Liam,
So
that you didn't track.
sorry. So it's really funny that you told me that you gave me the same answer, because I just want to clarify: is it not the case that in the example I just gave you, that they are establishing some, dispositional, positive dispositions towards flourishing? Is that not the case?
Positive dispositions towards flourishing? What do you mean there?
Like dispositions which contribute towards flourishing.
You're asking me if I think whenever a mother gets an abortion, is she contributing to flourishing in any
no.
way whatsoever?
Well,
Is that what you're asking me?
I gave you a list of potential. I
Just
gave
yes
you
or no? Is that what you're asking
No,
me?
it's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is
Okay.
that given that I gave you a list of things prior of the different properties and virtues which you instantiate, given that a mother gets an abortion, is it the case that they do not instantiate those lists of examples I gave you?
What list of examples are you referring to specifically?
Yeah, so I gave you what I gave you. Yeah, let me go through. So one of them was financial well-being, like in establishing someone's financial well-being, right? That's obviously going to contribute to their flourishing if they get an abortion. You're also allowing them to continue to remain their autonomous self-directedness, right? Insofar as they have literally less restrictions on being able to direct their physical body. They also have let's say
I've already responded to this.
Sorry, it is or it is not the case that those properties are instantiated.
Those properties are instantiated, and I gave a response to this.
And to clarify, those properties are pro tanto good, right?
That the fact that she's doing an abortion for the sake of her financial freedom, you're saying that's a pro tanto good?
No, that the things she's instantiating are pro tanto good.
No.
You don't think that financial well-being is pro tanto good?
Not in all cases, no.
You don't think that self-directedness is pro tanto good?
Not in all cases, no.
Right. Well, hold on. So whenever you tell me, see, now you're talking about the not all cases stuff, when your view, right? Essentially what you're telling me is that the reason people should not get abortions is because when they get abortions, it likely will contribute. It tends to correlate with a disturbance of harming yourself, your flourishing, and the flourishing of the species. And you rattle off a list of examples, right? Now I'm telling you, these things, even if actually whether or not they're, good,
What are you responding to right now?
whether or not, I'm helping you out, whether or not they're good inherently, I just want to clarify. Are the things, in the case of an elective abortion, do you not agree that if someone gets an abortion, one of the good aspects of getting an abortion is her financial well-being?
You didn't ask me if it was one of the good aspects. You asked me if it was a pro tanto good. I take those two things to be relevantly distinct. But if you're asking me if it's a good aspect, the fact that if you're asking me if it can be good for you to get an abortion as a result of your financial freedom, I don't even know, and it wouldn't fit my definition of what it means for something to be good. So I don't take it that thing is good.
Okay, so under your view, you don't think that things like personal, autonomous self-directedness, you don't think that fiscal conservatism and like making sure you have enough money, you don't think?
No,
that,
I don't think those things. I don't think those things are good.
I just want to about you don't think those things fall.
No, I don't think those things are a good reason for the sacrifice of another human being.
Well, I just want to. Whoa! Hold on. You said good reason. I just want to clarify. You don't think that insofar as those things exist as the consequence of an abortion, that those things contribute towards a flourishing life?
No, I don't think they contribute to a flourishing life insofar as they're disrupting the homeostatic mechanism.
You might say that on net, when you consider all of the different properties instantiated in the potential case of getting an abortion versus not getting an abortion, that it is worse to get an abortion given the disturbance of the species. I grant you can say that, but I want to clarify that in concluding that most abortions on net will correlate towards the disturbance of the performing of your functions and your flourishing, you have to agree that the things I listed out are positive, are things which contribute in favor of it not disrupting the species, but instead contributing towards your flourishing.
No, I don't have to agree to that. And the reason why I don't have to agree to that is because for the reasons that I already explained previously, right? So the reasons that I explained previously is that abortion as an action, right? That sort of thing is going to instantiate a set of properties, and it's also going to represent something. And the thing that it represents is a frustration, or rather something that's contravening to the relevant natural dispositional arcs that I already explained to you previously, which again, it's not the case that those dispositional arcs are necessarily emblematic, or you could say representative of the entire homeostatic mechanism that's maintained across the kind. But it is the case that the abortion as an individual action frustrates those natural dispositional arcs, okay? And so in virtue of this fact, right, for whatever reasons that the mother gets them, especially those fiscal reasons that you just listed, like financial reasons or the fact that she wants to do things that she likes to do, I don't think that those things are expressing the property of moral goodness. And the reason why I don't think that is because they fail to instantiate any of the relevant properties any of the relevant facts that plausibly fall under its extension.
Yeah, I think I've addressed this point. So, I mean, I don't have any points to make, so we can see time there.
Yes. So do you just want to do like closing then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Do you want to, you can go first and then I'll go after.
Okay. All right, guys. Okay, so starting off, let's just first understand the first point, okay? The first point of the argument was premise one, okay? And premise one, to clarify, was this. If some action was good, then that action would satisfy the predicate of good's extension, which is to say that if an action was good, then it would cause an instantiation of certain properties within a cluster of properties. And some of the examples of the properties in this cluster, like the things that a good action would cause, were basically tantamount to, summarize as, a flourishing life for you as an individual and for other individuals. Okay, so given that, I just want to clarify this. When determining whether an action is good and whether or not you should do an action, given what it causes, the question we have here is a question of conflicts of interest. If it's the case that your action were to cause things which are beneficial to your flourishing, but frustrate the flourishing of other people, the question I had for Kay's view is, how does your view adjudicate that? How does your view explain whether or not you should do an action if that action were to both cause flourishing aspects to you, but harm flourishing aspects to other people? I asked Kay for this, and he appealed to, quote, deeper well-being integration. Okay, now what deeper well-being integration is, presumably when you say deeper well-being, the question is, whose well-being are you integrating, right? Are you talking about from the perspective of the well-being of the person performing the action who benefits from the action? Or are you talking about the well-being of the person who you're harming, okay? This conflict of interest has to be resolved with some standard. Either you are saying that you should resolve the standard by appealing to yourself, in which, it's not the case that you should just inherently care about the flourishing of other people, in which case he's not able to justify that abortions don't perform the actions he's causing. Or it's the case that he's just going to, again, say that the adjudication of the conflict of interest is principally done by appealing to both of the people's interests and the facts about their flourishing. And again, like, he went on these long explanations of different things which are considered, like consonance of flourishing and the archetype of human function and being consistent with the homeostatic mechanisms across the species, right? All of that just to say, right, if you are performing an action and that action benefits you and harms other people, should you do it? He goes, relative to what? Relative to who's flourishing should you do it? And he's not able to give you a clear, concise answer. He's hiding behind the jargon. He's jargon juggernauting. He is not able to tell you whether or not an action is adjudicated in reference to your flourishing or other people. If other people's flourishing is considered, by what standard are they considered? Is it your flourishing or is it not? Now, on the second point, understand that the argument goes to say that abortion, when you do it, does not cause the things which are good, right? So this homeostatic property cluster, the cluster of properties that he considers to be relevant to making something good, he says abortion does not cause those things. Now, his argument for why that is true, that abortion does not cause those things, was to say that when you do not get abortion, that action of not getting abortion correlates to tending to cause things which are within the cluster. So, for example, when you don't get an abortion, he says that it tends to cause things like generativity and long-term meaning making and emotional coherence. Now, that's fine. Like, you can actually, I think most people understand there are benefits to not getting an abortion, right? Like, not getting an abortion can correlate to all these different things, but that's not sufficient to justify that abortion doesn't do that, right? You can admit that there are pros, right? There are advantages and good aspects about not doing a given thing, but that doesn't establish that not doing the opposite or doing that the opposite doesn't have any good aspects. He has to, in order to succeed in the argument, tell you that getting an abortion does not cause the good aspects. Now, I gave in an example a list of reasons why people should get an abortion, a list of reasons that, according to Kay's property cluster, should presumably be relevant, that improve your flourishing as a human being. For example, health-related reasons, mental health-related reasons, socioeconomic reasons, your financial reasons, career reasons, life plan disruptions, personal relationship reasons, etc. There's a wide list of things which an abortion, if you got it, would cause to your life, which would actually aid in the benefiting of your life, okay? Now, Kay, assuming he agrees, if he agrees that these things are instantiated when you get an abortion, he is having to tell you whether or not, he's having to justify, essentially, whether on net getting an abortion is better than on net not getting an abortion, because that's what it is. It's calculating what the things you're causing, okay? Obviously, in virtue of the fact that getting an abortion does cause these positive things, he's not able to do this argument and saying that just because not getting an abortion causes these positive things, that getting an abortion doesn't. Overall, in summary, you can understand the argument as this. All of the substantive points were hidden behind evasions and long-winded explanations, very convoluted explanations, simply to just not justify the view. No matter how he spins it, no matter the meta, whatever he appeals to, it is the case that the argument does not go through.
Just let me know when I can go. Or is it on my first word?
On your first word.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so number one, this guy claims that my argument didn't fall through, and he claims that I was like hiding behind jargon when I was responding to his questions. It is not my fault if you can't track or you can't respond or even track the things that I'm saying to you. That's not my fault. That seems like a tracking error on you. Throughout this entire debate, Liam had no novel questions, no novel responses to anything that I said. He asked me the same question, I think, about 6 times. In fact, the first 25 minutes of his cross was him just asking me the same question in different ways over and over again, to which I responded each and every single time, right? So if you didn't track the responses that I gave you, that's not on me, that's on you. Now, back to the actual relevant substance of the conversation, the more substantive portion, right? So he asked me something like this: how is it the case that given that some agent, let's just say, is doing some action that's consonant with their flourishing, but they're doing an action that's inconsistent with the flourishing of other agents, how do we adjudicate this? In virtue of what principle is it the case that we can even adjudicate such a matter? And then the response that I gave him was two things. The first response was that you adjudicate it with reference to, number one, facts that are consonant with flourishing, and number two, facts about the functional architecture of the human being. Now, the reason why that's the case is because of the background commitments that I have about the existence of moral properties themselves. I already explained previously in the opening statement that moral properties like good, bad, ought, should, flourishing, all those things are constituted by certain natural properties. And I already explained how they're not only anything over and above natural properties. And so in virtue of this fact, those things are going to be what contribute, or rather help contribute, to the functioning and well-being of human beings, or rational actors more specifically. And so it is the case that these homeostatic property clusters, those things help us identify these clusters in such a way where they realize or constitutes the relevant moral facts. And so, so going back to the response about the adjudication thing, I can just sort of give this analogy that he prevented me from giving during the debate for some odd reason. The analogy that I was going to give was something like this. Imagine if I said that I'm going to cheat on my taxes, and I said, cheating on my taxes is beneficial for me. It's consonant with my flourishing. It makes me happy, right? I get, I get more money in my pocket and whatever other facts that come with cheating on the taxes, right? And then the question is, how do we adjudicate? What is the normative assessment on this person? Are they doing something good, or are they doing something bad? Now, the obvious answer to this question, at least from my purview, is that they're doing something bad. And the reason why they're doing something bad is not in virtue of them benefiting from that action, but it's in virtue of them engaging in an action that disrupts a homeostatic mechanism that is causally maintained across members of a certain kind. Okay, so in that case of tax evasion specifically, let's say that you have a particular government, right? Now, if you do that, right, those things could eventually lead to other problems, like, for example, later on in the future, or maybe it might lead to other problems for other people who do pay taxes, for example. That's a very obvious, really fucking simple analogy to demonstrate that even if you're doing something that's good for you, that you perceive to be good, it could be the case that you're doing something that's inconsistent with the mechanism of something being good all across, all in totality, right? Now, lastly, right, Liam also didn't track the response that I was giving about whether or not, or excuse me, what I meant by an action being morally wrong. He said that it is not the case that simply because I point out the fact that the mother getting an abortion is an instantiation, or rather a failure of an instantiation, it doesn't necessitate that the action is actually morally bad. That's just all I take wrong to mean. I just take it that the term wrong has an extension, and the extension is such that it includes a failure of the instantiation of those properties. And so if some action fails to instantiate those relevant properties, then the action, trivially speaking, on my view, is going to be morally wrong. That's just what a morally wrong action is. It's an action that fails to instantiate the relevant properties that are consistent with those natural facts and those virtues and those dispositional tendencies, and also the virtuous dispositional tendencies with respect to the veridical visual perceptual relations to external world facts. And lastly, right, I just want to note this. There's nothing that Liam asked me today that undermined my view, nothing that he asked me today that undercut my view, nothing that demonstrated a contradiction, nothing that even began to touch the surface of my view. The only thing that he did was ask me very, very surface level questions. He asked me repeated questions, to which I answered all of them. And then in the middle of me answering all of his questions, what he did was he accused me of not answering his questions in the middle of me answering his questions, and then tried to make it seem rhetorically as if I wasn't answering the questions, even though I did. Liam, you failed horribly. That was a pathetic attempt against my argument. Good luck next time.
Okay, now time for my closing statement.
Yo, can we bet?
There's a poll in the top left. 3 minutes on the poll. Vote for who you think won. There's no judges, but if some people want to come up and give some thoughts, that's okay as long as everybody on the panel has time
So,
for that.
thank you. Thank you, honey, for that. By the way, I have 670 coins for Planned Parenthood. You guys can send me more gifts. They're all going to Planned Parenthood.
What's up,
Yeah,
Dean?
can we just get a fire Julian in the chat? Thank you very much. I think that was the worst mod ever. Yo, top 10 like worst mods ever. I'm
On
just
my
like
life,
disappointed
bro.
with this guy.
On my life, bro.
Can you? Thank you, Danny.
Look, Julian was trying. That's all that matters. He was trying.
See, I try my best. I mean,
Hey, it's okay, man. Sometimes it's about the effort, you know.
yeah, and please
Exactly.
stop disturbing my homeostatic predicate.
Yeah, bro. Fuck.
No. Homeostatic mechanism. Okay, you
Yeah,
gotta
what's
get
the
it
mech,
right.
bro? It's not the properties themselves.
By the way, Liam, no hard feelings. You're a cool guy. I just hope you know it's all rhetoric. No, I don't have any beef with you.
Yo, W Liam, W Kojo, great debate. Thanks, honey, for hosting.
Thank you.
So we didn't ask for this. So what's your opinion? Who won? What? Okay.
Oh, alright.
Can someone who is not a troll come up and give their opinion? Look, I didn't even get to give my closing statement, so how could I lose? Oh, okay, a non-troll. Colette, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. If we were defining abortion to include C-sections, would this still be murder?
Really good question there. Nice one.
Can you answer?
No,
No, it wouldn't be? Or no, you can't answer.
I'm not gonna answer. It's a dumb question. Like, what are you asking?
Wait, how?
Okay.
Oh, that wasn't promising. Oh, hello, C. Oh, happy 60th.
Hello guys, hello everybody. Sup,
Yo,
I know you
is
guys
this
know
the
me.
C that I know?
Yeah, I'm pretty popular around these
Yo,
spaces.
what's good, man?
Talk about
Yeah, I mean,
Socrates.
look, I think honestly, I wasn't really tracking too much. It was too much like functional architecture and stuff like that. But you know, good debate. Yeah, I mean, I had a question for Kojo though.
Yeah, what's up?
So I think you said something like the goodness property isn't over and above the non-nat or the natural properties, correct? So like, do you
Correct.
take
Yeah, I
it
think
that
that. Yeah, they're synthetically reducible.
Why are we listening to C when we have a celebrity?
My good,
Oh, yeah, we have
yo,
to do
my
this.
good friend Dean Withers is here. Let's shut up, C.
Hey, what's going on, Liam? Man, you did absolutely great, bro. I mean, I think that you killed it, 110%. I just had a single, very serious question.
Can you tell me one point that Liam made?
Well, yeah, for sure. Like he made the point that the reasons in which you demonstrated your argument to be the case was relating to like some bad things that happen in society for people when other individuals get abortions. However, he pointed out that you have not considered the calculus or the good outcomes of the action either. And seemingly, he said that you'd have to demonstrate that the bad outcomes would outweigh the good outcomes, and you're incapable of doing so. That's what he pointed out in his closing statement.
That's why they pay Dean the
However, I
big
do have
bucks, bro.
Yeah, let's go. But I just had a question. Because it's a question for viewers. Okay, how many times did you mention nomic relations today? That's my one question.
As many times as you went to the gym.
Well, so I went to the gym once. You mentioned it once.
There you go.
I thought that you'd mention it at least 10. But anyways, that's my only question. Thank you, guys.
Wait,
Very
Dean.
informative question, Dean. Good one.
Oh, he left. I was gonna ask like get signatures.
When's the round 2? Just to be clear, because I want to tune in for that too.
This was round
We
2.
got the schedule.
Round
but-
2. I don't know. We gotta schedule it.
Are we gonna have the same moderator?
No.
No, Julian is not moderating.
C, right?
Yo, what's up? Is this was that Goons?
Hey, fucking
Yeah, we'll have
C.
another moderator probably.
We have
Yo,
someone who
what's up,
failed
James?
his GCSEs, and we have goons. Oh my!
And so
Alec,
me and
let's
have
C
a
were
what's
supposed
up?
to debate, right? We can just do that up here right now.
I
Just to
don't
clarify,
actually know.
guys, a portion of my proceeds are going to proceeds are going to the Abortion Freedom Fund. Providing medical abortion access to people in legally attacked states. So,
All of mine are going to Honey. So any and all gifts that I get today, it's all going straight to Honey, and Honey is gonna send it to the to the.
The fundraiser is Mothers
Okay,
Against
can we
Drunk Driving.
remove
Julian!
these people for non-calls?
The
Alright, guys, I'm
fundraiser
going
is-
down now.
the-
I'm just
the
subscribed to my
fun-
YouTube
okay.
channel, See Debates. Thanks. Yeah, I'm going down.
See, no
Yes,
one
Give
wants
it up,
to
see.
subscribe.
Hello?
subscribe to me, please.
Okay, my fundraiser
Oh.
is Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So if you guys send gifts to me, I made $29. So far, whatever I made or whatever Kay's made is going there. So
Wait, honey, where can I donate to mothers for drunk driving?
that's insane.
That'll be to me
No-
and my
no
girl.
comment.
Thank you.
What's up, Boons? Do you have any
One thing
thoughts?
you don't joke about, Julian. That's one thing you don't joke about.
My goat is here. My goat.
Kian, what's up? Thoughts?
Yo,
Kian just killed himself in a drunk driving accident.
Jesus, dude.
Oh.
No thoughts, Goons?
I'm back. I do have a question for Kojo though. So Kojo, when Liam asked you his question about like what are the things that would make like abortion generally something that's not consistent with the homeostatic the things that are consistent over the species, can you give like examples of this?
Yeah, I already did. You can just watch the debate if you want to listen to that.
By the way, Liam.
Yeah, because you have to understand, like,
Sorry. Go ahead.
oh, what? Just to say, so for Kay's view, like, badness is not necessarily like the instantiation of a vice. Like, something being bad can be just a failure to establish a good, right? So he doesn't actually have to list negative. He doesn't have to list negative things about getting an abortion. He just has to prove that getting an abortion doesn't
Fails
instantiate.
to instantiate the properties.
Yeah, so he could give bad things about abortions, but that's not required for his argument. Assuming that there's no non-neutrality, because like technically in the way if it's framed, like the conclusion is just abortion is not good. It doesn't follow that it's bad. Like it presumably could just be not good or bad. But I mean, I'm not gonna.
That's like another. We can have that conversation another time. But
Well,
yeah,
I'm just assuming like if something is an action, then it is either good or bad. Like there's just like another premise, So I mean, it's like also true. Like presumably, like if an action is either good or bad. So
I mean, wait. Wait, can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Yeah,
Ian,
quick
I
question.
can't hear you.
Hey, like when you were talking about the relationship between good and the homeostatic property clusters, was that like a supervenience relation there?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, I wasn't. Okay.
That's actually what I wrote on my notes. I wrote when you were explaining the nature of moral properties. You said, you said not reducible, but not over and above. I just wrote moral properties are supervenient ?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a supervenience relation. So it is the case that moral properties supervene on natural facts.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you take the view that they supervene on like actions, or do you take the view they supervene on like external objects?
I'm agnostic about that claim specifically about whether or not they supervene on actions or external objects.
Oh, okay.
Wait, so do you think that are you familiar with some of the cases given for like non-naturalism in the literature? Like some cases are like imagine
For
if you had like
non-naturalism?
to motivate the the anti-supervenience relation. So saying something like, well, if it's only the case that changes to natural facts change the moral like domain or something, you could have it such that you have like take a non-natural item like two angels or something, right? They're like non-natural or something. And they like start unaliving each other or something. Presumably natural facts can't explain the wrongness there, but we still have the intuition that there's
The
like
fucking
make
okay.
it
So I understand it's like a real argument, but like you're just telling me
Yeah.
like, oh, this is like, what if angels fight?
yeah,
This is like a dumb. I mean,
but
this is like the
it's a good point, right? Like
this is like the
it's a good
response to the Trinity, where it's like, what if Jesus fights God the Father? Who wins?
But it's not, because the point is that like wrongness clearly transcends like natural properties.
What if an angel fights a demon?
No, but the point is that you can explain wrongness in terms of non-natural facts too, and that would defeat the supervenience
Wait, who
relation.
won the poll, by the way?
Liam won. He had 79, I believe, and you had 72.
Oh, that's pretty close.
Yeah, I believe it was pretty close.
Look, the one who judges the debate will be me.
Actually, what are your thoughts on the debate, Julian? I'm curious.
There's no
Like your
thought.
serious thoughts.
Okay, so I mean a few things. The first thing I would like to have seen is like you might even say that abortion is bad in some ways, or even worse uh, than not getting an abortion. I mean, you have to spell out the relevant facts. You have to take into account Liam's considerations of it doesn't make the person getting the abortion happier, life less stressful, etc. And even once you weigh out the facts, I mean, saying that something's abortion's wrong or is unjustified, you might think is a stronger claim than just saying that generally the fetus is worse off, or and after weighing, one's worse than the other. So you're making a stronger claim under many views of what wrong and right are than just one option's kind of worse than the other. It has to be significantly worse than the other.
What is that point indexed to when you say worse than another?
So when you're doing the weighting between the the flourishing of the fetus and the flourishing of the woman, and weighing out certain things relevant to those well-being facts. So when you're doing the weighting, you might even end up saying that, abortion is worse, which, I mean, is still something that I feel hasn't been fully established in debate. But even if you said this, it might matter how much worse it is. Ideally, you want to say it's significantly worse so much that it makes abortion this very, very bad action to do.
I don't know if I want to use that sort of language to capture the theory, things being better or worse. Rather, I think the sort of language that I might be inclined to use is saying things like whether or not the action either instantiates a set of properties or it fails to instantiate the set of properties.
Well, ideally,
also to clarify, like
that's what I would say.
Also, like there were really like two different standards for what makes something good. The first one, obviously laid out, was like whether or not an action instantiates the properties we're talking about. But then at the end, it was like whether or not an action is like consistent with the homeostatic mechanism. So even if it instantiated good properties, is not consistent or something like that. So I mean, it's like kind of
to be fair, both actions, abortion and non-abortion, could instantiate the relevant properties. It matters like how much of them are.
Well, when
what
you say
extent they're instantiated.
Okay, but I don't know if that's really because you could say both of them can, as in it's possible for them to, but I don't think that's the claim that I'm more interested in making is whether or not they do, right?
Yeah, so,
and when we assess all the cases of abortion, it seems like they don't typically instantiate these properties.
well, okay, so there's obviously certain facts about getting an abortion that would be relevant to well-being considerations you're doing here. So, for example, whether the woman's better off when they're getting an abortion, which, I mean, in a lot of cases, they are going to be better off because maybe they can finish schooling, they don't have to worry about carrying an extra child and then paying for that child, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So
Does
that's
that really make you better off, though?
Yeah, I think those things do generally make people better off. And that's a big
Short-term or
long-term.
long-term?
This is the whole point about like understanding better offness is like relative to the functional requirements of flourishing. Like,
yeah, I don't think that's what better off. So wait, okay, wait, say it again. You said
better off
relative to
the functional requirements of flourishing.
Oh, okay, yes, I might agree with that, but I wouldn't say so. I don't know if that's the sense of better off that Julian is talking about. I think Julian might be talking about better off in a sense where she's better off insofar as she's satisfied her desires, in that moment when she gets an abortion. Let's say one of her desire set is that, or one member in her desire set is that she wants to finish college, for example, or she wants to have a certain type of relationship or things like that. And so insofar as the abortion is, it's consistent with realizing or satisfying those desires, then she's better off. But I don't have that conception of better off.
It's not an exhaustive, that's not supposed to be an exhaustive list, but I do think if your concept of well-being is totally detached from those desires, I think it's an implausible account of well-being.
Oh, no, I don't think it's fully detached, but I don't think that those things are constitutive of well-being.
No, I don't think that either. They're not exactly what makes up well-being, but they're certainly relevant considerations you have to take into mind. And if these are relevant considerations you have to take into mind, you have to do weighting between, okay, what bad things happen during abortion and how bad are they? And then you have to do the weighting, and you have to say it's significantly worse. The alternative.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm kind of resistant against using that because the worse and better off thing, that sort of like is like what a lot of the harm theoretic camp of people like to use. But my view is not a harm theoretic view. It's like a substance oriented view. I guess you could say it's like an HPC view. So the sort of language that I'm more inclined to use is whether or not some given action or state of affairs either instantiates a given set of properties or not, or whether or not the action in question is something that plausibly falls under the extension of the predicate. I think
I
those
don't
are
think
more
that
accurate
matters
terms.
because the language you're using, like, so homeostatic functionality or something like that. So I think those are gradients. Like something can be more conducive to that functionality than another
Right.
thing. So you can say better or worse off in the sense that one thing might contribute more to that end than the other
You can
thing.
weigh it like teleologically. It's not like a binary.
Oh, okay. So by that, you're just talking about the fact that by better off, you mean something realizes or instantiates more properties.
Yeah,
That are contributed, that are like that are
Yeah,
yeah.
that's fine then. That I had a different concept of better off or worse off when you were talking about that.
Yeah,
But if
so
that's what you mean, then that's fine.
and that's one of the things Liam brought up in discussion that I thought was good, is that, well, you have to take into account what happens during both cases, not just when someone gets an abortion or these properties.
Because the moral decision is like you as an actor are weighing the alternative of doing an abortion versus not getting an abortion, and so in doing that, it's the way you would make a decision, presumably under this view, is the comparative advantage in terms of like the correlation that the different options have to promoting or causing the instantiation of the relevant properties in the cluster. And so in doing that, you have to give analysis of like, okay, well, abortions, do they cause good dispositions? Well, yeah, I mean, they can cause like the disposition of financial well-being or something, but that's the point I was making. Like you have to do the weighing of that world in order
Right,
to
but
say.
the point that I was making though was that, so remember we have in the background that flourishing is like sort of central to this account of good that I'm imploring here, right? And given that fact, and also given the synthetic reducibility relation to like the cluster of properties, like whenever we're, you could say, evaluating some action, right? That's going to be with respect to whether or not the action number one is characterized by that homeostatic cluster, and whether or not the action is consistent with realizing the facts about flourishing.
This is like a rule view, right? This is like how you explain that
You
you're a
can
rule
think
view.
about it. Yeah, you can think about it like a rule view. So the point is that let's look at the cluster of traits. One of it might be something like practical reason or practical rationality, for example. Another one might be I don't know, like empathy, or another one, as an example, as another one, right? The point is that I fail to see upon investigation that abortion realizes any of these relevant facts. And so in virtue of that, I think that there's reason to believe that the abortion is wrong.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I understand what your argument is, but I think it's just like what I said.
Also, one thing I probably would have done is you might think this is stupid, but I would have said that doing something bad to someone else actually reduces your well-being.
That's like what I was trying to. So that's why like the framing is, as I understand it, the quote unquote normative authority or bindingness behind realizing virtues or doing good things for neo-Aristotelian views is in light of the fact that it could contradict your nature as a human being to do such. It's like what grounds your commitment to your flourishing is the fact that your agency is grounded in your nature. So there's no like making decisions not accounting for your nature. But like the neo-Aristotelians, the way that they explain like why to be nice to other people and why to care about other people, is they will bake into your nature as a human being like a psychosocial function, and say that like what it doesn't mean, like what it means to be a good human for you, like what it means to perform your functions is to help other people perform theirs.
I agree with that, by the way. It is a it's a biopsychosocial function that we tend to like build friendships and relationships and those sorts of things. I think that's a function.
This was also earlier than Aristotle. Socrates argued this too.
Yeah, I 100% believe that.
Yeah, it's just about like ultimately how you weigh the decisions in making it good, because like you do consider the social ramifications of your action, but is that because the well-being of others is like intrinsically good, or is that because the well-being of others is like constitutive of following your function as an animal with psychosocial tendencies?
Also another judgment I want to make is, so there was this distinguishment between people who can reach eudaimonia are have those sort of features, and then people can just flourish, or entities can just flourish. I'm wondering if that's an important distinction when you're doing moral evaluations. So do I care about somebody's well-being who can merely flourish as much as I do someone who has the eudaimonia properties? Like I don't care about a tree.
He says that all human beings,
Have
what
the
it means to
property of
flourish as a
flourishing.
human being is eudaimonia. Like eudaimonia is human flourishing.
You can think about flourishing as the facts about flourishing can be in some sense realized in multiple ways given the nature of the objects that are
But wait,
I guess you could say on developmental path to flourishing. So like a tree can
before,
flourish.
before in the beginning of the debate, you did say something like, well, someone who's not rational cannot, have those sort of.
Well, so when I say not rational, what I mean is that something that doesn't have a rational nature, not that they're actively deploying rationality.
Oh, okay. And you think that all are part of the kind, the deep metaphysical things.
Yes, like the whole
Okay.
kind talk and natural kinds and stuff. Yeah, but so again, I think other things that don't belong to the kind can flourish, right? Like I think a plant can flourish in its own ways. I think snails flourish in their ways, ants, same thing. But the point is that humans have a very distinctive type of flourishing, or we have distinct facts about our flourishing because of the nature that we have.
Yeah, I don't know. Like either way, there might be a moral distinction, or you're going to have to carry some heavy metaphysical claims. Either way, it's very hard to do. But okay.
I agree, it's hard to do, but it's not a project that I'm not willing to embark on.
We know.
Definitely embark on it.
We know.
Yeah, when you're
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like when you're debating, and I said this in my opening, it's like, well, there just are going to be a lot of moving parts. So literally one minor disagreement, one disagreement in something really far back in philosophy would be very relevant.
I think people don't realize that these types of discussions, they're going to get very technical, hyper technical. We're going to be assessing all the terms, what everything means, and all the relevant background concepts. So but I think people are not used to these types of discussions because people usually hear I guess you could say a level 1 type of discussion. Oh, abortion is wrong because human and alive, or abortion is okay because my body, my choice. So when they hear these types of discussions, it sounds like jargon to them, when in reality, you're just not used to this type of discourse because you're usually acquainted with those level 1 discourse.
But I mean, our views, despite that they're technical, I mean, they're just our very fancy versions of these arguments. Your view is a very fancy argument about being human and alive, and my view is a very fancy bodily autonomy argument. It's it ends up saying that in essence, right? It's it's human and alive. Duh.
But both of those views are ridiculous, but
Well, I don't know about that, but I can see what you're saying.
Okay, but also it might be nice in your disputes to sometimes make some concessions to people. Sometimes that's necessary to do if you want the dialogue to move forward in a meaningful way. So it's not always about, okay, I think this view is really true. Sometimes in these disputes, it's okay, let's grant my opponent this. What can I reason about? It's not like Judith Jarvis Thompson actually thought that people without conscious profiles have personhood. She just granted it for the sake of argument.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But yeah, that was a good debate, though. You're one of the few people that can actually challenge me on my view, so that was a pretty good challenge. I don't know if Honey, do you plan on, or are you just kind of chilling, Honey? Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I usually don't give my thoughts on the debates on live.
No, I'm talking about with the
Honey,
donation
speak up, speak your mind.
As far as what? Sorry.
The donation stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, I just wanted to let everybody know the fundraiser that I'm donating to is Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I got $29 to donate, and Kay said that he's going to give his gifts as well, so whatever that adds up to be. And then I'll just share it on my story here on TikTok and on Instagram.
Yep.
And then if you guys missed the debate, I'm going to upload it on my YouTube, which is just Honey IRL, so you can go watch it there if you missed it.
Also, go there if you want to watch Dean get sizzled. Dean got sizzled last night.
Can you add my my YouTube in your YouTube?
Yeah. Just send me a message of what you want me to put in the description. Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Oh, and also, I'll be sending all my gifts to mothers for drunk driving. So, if that's something that interests you.
Julian.
By the way, Julian, what are your problems with? Do you agree with Cornelianism?
Uh, not exactly. I mean, there I'm not going to go into it, but intuitively, there seems to be like a meaningful way that investigating about moral truths differs from using the scientific method. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry that joke is not funny. Okay. I'm sorry, it's disgusting that I made that joke. I'm a morally corrupt person, okay? Is that what you wanted to hear, Link?
Yeah, that's crazy.
All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap up the live, but you guys can just let me know if you want to do that part 2. I heard you guys talking about on the live that Liam might want to have his own where he takes the affirmative and where he
Yeah,
investigates review. So if you guys just want to let me know, happy to host that again if you'd like.
yeah, for sure. We can do a part 2 where I investigate Liam's view the whole time. That's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna
Okay.
end the live. Thanks, guys, for coming by.